Hello. Today was supposed to mark the joyful start of our honeymoon, a trip we had planned together. But just as we were about to leave, my husband unexpectedly tore up my passport. He seemed oddly satisfied with himself, leaving me utterly bewildered and furious. I never intended to travel with him. My plans had always been to go with my mother. Although there had been some underlying tension before we got married, I hadn't fully grasped the depth of the issues between him and his mother. It was a shock to realize no one in my circle had ever discussed anything as bizarre as a mother-in-law dominating their honeymoon plans. This revelation left me more than just angry. It felt surreal. Doubts about my marriage began to creep in when he began cutting my passport into pieces, especially seeing his mother's unsettling grin. I knew then I needed to get away quickly. This dramatic turn of events provided me with the unexpected but perfect evidence I needed against them both. My name is Catherine. I'm 30 and have been in the workforce for 5 years. Recently, my boyfriend proposed and I eagerly accepted, excited to begin planning our wedding and honeymoon. Meeting my husband was a surprise in my career. I've always been somewhat reserved, and though I had a boyfriend in college, I hadn't seriously dated anyone after that. So, getting married before many of my colleagues was as surprising to me as it was to everyone else. My husband, who was a senior at the company when I joined, always supported me through challenging tasks. Despite having only dated one other person, who was a classmate, my husband's maturity, being 4 years my senior, made him appear reliable and trustworthy. I was overjoyed when he asked me out on our first date, and I cherished the dolphin figurine we bought at the aquarium that day. His clear intentions of dating with marriage in mind gave me a sense of security. We enjoyed many wonderful dates before he proposed, each one a step closer to the life I envisioned. At the very same aquarium where we had our enchanting first date, I found myself wondering, could I really be this happy? That night was so exhilarating I couldn't even sleep, and the memory of that joy remains vivid in my mind. Riding on that high, we decided to visit his parents' house the following week. However, during that visit, my initial excitement began to wane as I started to feel uncertain about our upcoming marriage. My father-in-law was welcoming, but my mother-in-law seemed less than thrilled with me. She even remarked, suggesting that my fiancé could have married someone more impressive than just an ordinary girl. Her words planted seeds of doubt about our future together, making me feel uneasy. Despite this, I thought it might just be pre-wedding jitters, so I carried on with the wedding plans, trying to keep a brave face. Then, one day, while discussing our future life together, both my husband and his mother just assumed that I would quit my job. Although I once thought leaving work post-marriage would be ideal, I no longer saw it as my only path. Reflecting on this, I realized that my concerns about our marriage were likely what deterred me from considering such a drastic change. Despite my mother-in-law's insistent suggestions that I quit, I decided to continue working at the same company as my husband, effectively ignoring her advice. During our wedding planning, we disagreed on when to officially register our marriage. He wanted to do it sooner rather than later, and ultimately we went with his preference, registering just a short while later. The process was straightforward, but becoming officially married brought me genuine happiness. We had initially talked about having a small, intimate wedding, but as soon as he mentioned this to his mother, she intervened. The very next day she called, insisting, "You're planning a small wedding for Henry? Please don't make such decisions without considering everyone's opinions. The wedding should be grand and elaborate. I'll make sure it's exactly what Henry wants. And keep your guest list limited, just your parents and close friends. Your friends wouldn't add much excitement to the wedding anyway." I was overwhelmed by the barrage of opinions about the wedding venue and the guest list. It was incredibly frustrating to feel that my soon-to-be mother-in-law thought she could dictate every aspect of our wedding. Her overbearing attitude was becoming a significant strain, making the joyful process of wedding planning more of a battleground. Despite my strong feelings about the situation, I chose not to argue with her. I thought perhaps this was just the nature of weddings, so I silently agreed to invite only my parents and close friends, as she had insisted. However, her meddling didn't end with the guest list. She had opinions on every detail: the schedule, entertainment, decorations, and even the menu. If we had implemented all her suggestions, our budget would have been completely blown out of proportion. Initially, Henry's family had agreed to share the wedding costs with us, but unexpectedly, they shifted all financial responsibility onto my family, pushing us well beyond our planned expenses. I found myself covering all the additional costs for the extravagant touches she demanded, transforming my dream of a simple ceremony into an ostentatious affair. In an attempt to manage costs, I made a few discreet changes, hoping to save some money, but she discovered these adjustments and berated me for what she called making the wedding look cheap by not adhering to her vision. After the wedding, I was looking forward to putting some distance between myself and my mother-in-law, but then Henry surprised me with unsettling news. Despite my clear desire for space from her, he insisted we move into her house. Our new apartment, which we had already secured, was suddenly canceled without my consent, and all our belongings were redirected to his family's home. I was left speechless and shocked by these unilateral decisions. Throughout the wedding planning, I managed everything alone. When I cautioned Henry about the potential financial overrun from following all his mother's extravagant requests, he simply ignored my concerns. My anxiety, already heightened, soared. We had planned an overseas honeymoon, which was supposed to be a dream getaway for me. However, my enthusiasm waned due to Henry's peculiar behavior and the daunting prospect of living with his mother upon our return. Strangely, while Henry was unhelpful with the wedding arrangements, he took the initiative to book our honeymoon flights and accommodations. I had hoped he had chosen a romantic destination, and despite having to pay for it all myself, I was relieved he was contributing in some way, especially with all the prior excitement and stress. The wedding chaos had barely settled when the day of our honeymoon finally arrived. Despite my unresolved concerns about the wedding and the daunting prospect of moving in with his mother, I was determined to make the most of our trip with Henry. However, my resolve was tested when, in the middle of the night, as we prepared to leave for the airport, Henry casually dropped a shocking revelation. "Catherine, I'm going with my mom instead," he announced nonchalantly as I checked her luggage. I was stunned. "What do you mean? This is our honeymoon, not just any trip. Why would your mom come along? We only booked for 2, for the flights and the hotel." As I struggled to grasp the situation, Henry revealed even more bewildering news. "I never said I was going on this trip with you, did I?" "Don't be ridiculous. I'm going with my mom. It's a thank you trip for everything she's done for me. You stay here and clean the house from top to bottom." Before I could react, Henry began to tear up my passport. I watched in disbelief, unable to utter a word as he destroyed it. Just then, his fully dressed mother barged into the room without knocking. "Henry, are you ready?" she asked eagerly. Seeing her, Henry's face brightened. "Yeah, we're all set. Finally, we can go on this trip without any interruptions." They both chuckled, leaving me feeling utterly disgusted. It was a moment of harsh realization. I was on the verge of marrying into what felt like a nightmare. I had been pondering how to get along with my mother-in-law, but this situation was beyond anything I could have imagined. The reality hit hard. I had made a monumental mistake. As they prepared to leave, I finally spoke my mind. "I see now what kind of people you both are." Yet they simply laughed off my words as if they meant nothing and left together. Feeling utterly betrayed, I reflected on the recent events. I had been so pleased thinking Henry was taking an active role in arranging our honeymoon, but it turned out to be a setup for him to travel with his mother. He had orchestrated everything, even booking all arrangements under her name, and left me responsible for the expenses. The betrayal cut deep, marking a turning point in how I viewed our relationship and what my future would hold with Henry. Overwhelmed by anger more than sadness, I found myself grappling with the devastation wrought by my husband and mother-in-law. What were supposed to be the most unforgettable moments of my life, my wedding and honeymoon, had turned into surreal episodes of disappointment. At first, I was in disbelief, unable to accept that this was my reality. But as the truth settled in, I knew I had to act swiftly and decisively. I needed a divorce, and interestingly enough, I had something that might assist me in the process. I had begun recording various moments since the wedding preparations, not just for keepsakes, but to capture the essence of these significant life events. Initially, these recordings were intended to preserve precious memories, but they gradually became a log of my mother-in-law's hurtful behavior and outright harassment. There were times I considered stopping, thinking these recordings would never again see the light of day. Yet, in a twist of irony, they became invaluable. Just days after moving in, I found myself hastily repacking my belongings. It didn't take long, as I had barely unpacked. The thought that my husband and his mother might already be at the airport enraged me, but I pushed the anger aside. I wanted to leave no trace of my brief stay in that house, so I cleaned it meticulously. While cleaning the living room, I stumbled upon something astonishing. Evidence that my husband was embezzling money from his company. In his role overseeing sales, he had been reporting lower earnings and pocketing the difference. Shockingly, his mother was complicit. She kept detailed notes of the actual sales figures and the money he siphoned off, and even cataloged the luxury items he bought for her with the stolen funds. Discovering this malfeasance left me horrified. For a moment, I considered trying to smooth things over, especially since I worked at the same company. But then I thought, why should I protect someone who had so blatantly betrayed me, opting to take his mother on what was meant to be our honeymoon? Armed with the evidence of embezzlement, I headed straight to the company. Although they were supposed to be enjoying their honeymoon, my presence in the office surprised my colleagues. Everyone bombarded me with questions about why I was there instead of on my honeymoon. I decided to be open. I had nothing to hide. I explained that my husband and his mother had taken the trip instead, that my passport had been destroyed, and that I had shouldered the cost for the entire journey. This ordeal not only marked the end of my marriage, but also revealed the true colors of the people I had once trusted. My colleagues, bosses, and superiors were stunned and incensed on my behalf. I appreciated their concern and headed towards the executive wing of our company. What none of them knew was that one of the top executives at the company was my uncle. I had never disclosed this relationship to anyone, not even my husband or mother-in-law, as I didn't want anyone to think I landed my job through nepotism. I had secured my position purely on my own merits, and since my uncle wasn't involved in human resources, I had requested him to keep our relationship under wraps. He agreed, respecting my wishes, and we maintained strictly professional interactions at work. As a child, my uncle had always treated me with immense affection, almost like his own child. He indulged my every wish, and we shared many trips, despite my parents occasionally chiding me for asking too much of him. Since I joined the company, our interactions have been limited to professional exchanges, except for a brief moment during orientation. Upon entering his office now, his initial warm smile quickly turned to concern as he could tell something was amiss. "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" he asked. Seeing his familiar, caring face, I broke down, and through my tears, I recounted everything that had happened. My uncle's expression turned to one of fury, a side of him I had seldom seen. After I explained the situation with my husband's embezzlement and presented the evidence, my uncle immediately promised to convene a board meeting to address the issue. He was supportive, and after discussing the necessary steps to take at work, He suggested we go out for a meal to help me get my mind off things for a moment before driving me home. Despite the profound betrayal I had endured, I felt immense gratitude for the genuinely caring people in my life. About a week later, when my husband and mother-in-law returned from what was meant to be our honeymoon, my husband called, livid that I hadn't picked them up from the airport or cleaned the house as he had instructed. He demanded to know my whereabouts. By then, with the support of my uncle and parents, I had already engaged a top-notch divorce lawyer, and proceedings were well underway. Without letting my husband get another word in, I responded firmly, "You two are loud and irritating. I don't want to hear your voice anymore. Why would I pick up someone I'm divorcing?" This marked a definitive end to our relationship, as I chose to move forward surrounded by those who truly valued and respected me. "Why would I follow your commands to clean?" I asked. He seemed shocked for a moment, but quickly continued his tirade. "Do you think it's okay to speak to me like that? I did you a favor by marrying you. If we divorce, you'll never find anyone else. My mom's furious too. If you come back now and cook for us, I might forgive you. We're tired of the foreign food. Make us some traditional meals." His words were stunning, especially after his deceit and choosing to travel with his mother instead of me. It was then I realized that the man I thought I knew was never really there at all. Over the past few days, while reflecting on these revelations, I consulted a lawyer to initiate our divorce. "Please discuss any further matters with them," I responded firmly. "Divorce? What are you talking about? We're not getting a divorce," he protested, disbelief in his voice. I could hear his mother in the background, demanding the phone and hurling insults my way. "Well, do as you please. By the way, I informed the company about your embezzlement. They might be calling you in soon. Maybe you should get a lawyer too. Bye." I could sense his panic through the phone, but I was beyond caring. He kept calling, but I blocked his number. My uncle, aware of our original honeymoon dates, had already taken action. The company summoned my husband based on the evidence I provided. They verified the information and confirmed the discrepancies in the payments. The amount he embezzled was significant. In front of the company's executives, my husband frantically tried to defend himself, even attempting to pin the embezzlement on me. That's when my uncle intervened, declaring, "My niece would never do such a thing. We've confirmed that you and your mother are responsible. You're lucky we haven't involved the police yet." Realizing his plans were falling apart and that I had connections in senior management, he looked utterly defeated. That day, I went to the company to return the wedding gifts to my colleagues. Despite the marriage ending so abruptly, they all refused to take them back, insisting they were given heartfelt blessings. Amid this support, my husband approached me, looking desperate. "Why didn't you tell me about your family connection? I'm sorry, truly. Can we start over? Can you ask your uncle to let me stay at the company and make the embezzlement charges go away?" Disgusted, I replied, "Do you even hear yourself? Are you serious? Divorce is the only way forward now. Reflect on your actions and face the consequences." After pushing him away, my colleague stepped in and called security, who removed him from the premises. He was immediately fired. As for the embezzlement, the company decided to pursue damages against him. When my mother-in-law tried to contact my family repeatedly, my father-in-law, after consulting with me, put an end to her attempts. I had always wondered why my father-in-law had seemed resigned about our marriage. Now, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, I was ready to move forward, free from the deceit and manipulation that had overshadowed my marriage. When he came back to apologize, admitting his mistake, it became clear that he had misunderstood the situation. He thought his mother was going on a domestic trip with her friends and was looking forward to a quiet week without her constant demands for shopping and dining out. When I got home after seeing the ridiculous things my husband and mother-in-law had done, my father-in-law supported my decision to return to my parents' home. He helped me pack, and with heavy hearts and few words, I left for my family's house. My father-in-law, who was genuinely kind and rational, would have stopped everything if he had known the full story. He was the only person in that house I felt I could trust. Feeling like a victim and embarrassed that my honeymoon was overtaken by my mother-in-law, I even thought about quitting my job. However, my parents suggested I take a break from work instead. Meanwhile, my uncle believed that staying busy with work might help distract me. After discussing with the CEO, they arranged for me to be transferred to a branch office. The divorce process with my husband proceeded smoothly, thanks to a great lawyer. Surprisingly, I later discovered that my father-in-law had played a role in this as well. During our wedding planning, it was revealed that my husband had almost no savings. My in-laws, being just an average working-class family with my mother-in-law's expensive habits, also had little saved up. Despite this, the alimony I received, considering our brief marriage, was quite generous. Shockingly, my father-in-law had to sell their family home to cover it. Their house wasn't in the city center, but in a close-knit community where everyone knew each other. On the day I was supposed to leave for our honeymoon, I returned to their family home with my luggage in hand. With the neighborhood's love for gossip, rumors started spreading fast. Over time, these rumors grew so exaggerated that living in that area became unbearable. Initially, my mother-in-law, always concerned about appearances, had approved of our marriage, but everything had dramatically changed. Since both my husband and I worked for prestigious companies, my mother-in-law took great pride in having both her son and daughter-in-law employed at major firms. It was a status symbol for her. However, due to her actions and the ensuing rumors, she likely found it unbearable to stay in that community. Additionally, my father-in-law probably felt a heavy burden of responsibility, having to cover for the financial damages caused by my husband's embezzlement. While I feel nothing but disdain for both my husband and mother-in-law, I genuinely pity my father-in-law. After being fired and ordered to pay damages, my husband suffered a mental breakdown and has been listlessly residing in a small apartment. Seeing her son in such a state, my mother-in-law withdrew into seclusion. My father-in-law, fed up with her behavior, even considered divorcing her as he did not want to spend his later years in such a strained marriage. He reached out to me, asking if I could connect him with the lawyer I had used. I promptly got my uncle involved, who facilitated contact with the lawyer. It might take some time, but I hope my father-in-law can eventually live the life he desires. Thanks to the intervention of the company's CEO and my uncle, I was transferred to a branch office where I was surrounded by supportive colleagues and superiors. I am immensely grateful to my uncle, who has been a pillar of support throughout this ordeal. The only regret I have is missing out on the country we had planned to visit for our honeymoon. Once things settle down, I hope to take a much-needed, relaxed trip abroad, making up for the lost opportunity.